Greetings, this is Management 430, Human Resource Management, and this set of lectures is about how do we determine pay for performance. And this is a combination of looking at performance appraisal information as well as the compensation side of it. Now, I want to be clear that pay for performance is not just about determining who gets pay increases or bonuses or things like that. The performance management or the performance appraisal process also has a developmental aspect to it. So when we do our evaluations of people, we check in and we see where there's need for improvement, and we also work on a development plan for them, which may involve our training and development function at some level, or it just may require some corrective changes to the behaviors that they've been engaged in. But either way, I want to make sure we understand that not all performance management is about the pay side of things. It's also about the developmental side of things. Just like it's important for us to have an overall HR strategy, it is also important for us to have a formal compensation strategy. And what that means is, what is going to be our plan for how do we evaluate people? How are we going to determine who gets paid what? How are we going to differentiate between good performers and poor performers and then determine compensation based on that? Now, we have a course in compensation that goes into way more detail than we're going to cover today, but this gives you the highlights primarily of what you can expect in those different areas of compensation strategy and what's involved in that. And along with having the plan, you also need to disseminate the plan. You need to communicate it to people. So making sure that that information is out with people is really important. Our goal, of course, at the end of the day is to align the financial incentives with the behaviors that we want to see. And we want to make sure when we are rewarding people for a behavior that it's the behavior that we want. Because often we think we're going to pay for something and say, oh, we're going to reward you for this, but in fact our system rewards people for something very different than what it is that we want them to do. So we want to make sure that there's a good alignment between what the financial incentive is going to be and how we determine what that financial incentive is going to be and how it aligns with the behaviors that we want to see exhibited by our employees. Pay for performance programs are the variable pay that we talked about in the first lecture series in this module, where we want to have the quantitative side of paying people for their performance. Remember, base pay is about the job itself. And then pay for performance is how we differentiate between good performers and poor performers and determine variable pay based on that. So if you're a good performer, you'll get a larger bonus or merit increase. And if you're a poor performer, you'll get a lower evaluation and pay for performance bonus or merit system. And so it's broken down really into three categories, but here they talk about two of them, which is the individual and then the group. There's also at the organization level. When an organization does profit sharing, that is at the org level. So we look at the profit margin, we decide which proportion of that will be distributed out to people, and then proportionately based on their base pay or their performance evaluation, they will get a piece of that pay for performance bonus at the profit sharing at the corporate level. But most often when we're talking about pay for performance plans, the most salient ones are the individual and the group ones. So how do we reward and encourage and motivate individuals to perform in a particular way, and then how do we get groups to perform in conjunction with each other to make sure that they are behaving the way that we want them to behave as a group in a cooperative manner. And typically you see that as bonuses or some sort of awards, like an attendance award or something along that line, or an incentive. Now the difference between a bonus or a merit increase and an incentive is the bonus or the merit increase is about a reward for past behaviors. We look back over the year and we say, oh, what you did was lovely, and you performed really well, you met your goals, so we're going to give you a large bonus and based on that. Or you did not perform as well, so you'll get a bonus, but just not as big as the other person will get. The incentive is about encouraging future performance. And so it's forward looking, and it's like a carrot and a stick. And so we have the carrot in front of the individual, in essence, and we say, if you do X, you will get that carrot. If you do X, you will get that reward. Now, there's pros and cons to this, and we'll get into that, but the incentive systems work really well for very rudimentary, simple jobs. They do not work well for motivating high performance when they're very complex jobs. And that was what we learned when we listened to Daniel Pink talk about intrinsic motivation and autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I am sharing with you another video that he did, which was his TED Talk, that really gets into more nuance on why incentives are really not the best. Incentive plans are not always the best to get people's performance the way we want it to be. So merit pay is a little bit different than a bonus. A bonus is like a lump sum thing, and we'll get that in the next slide. But merit pay is a percentage of your pay based on your performance ratings, and we determine that you will get a certain percentage increase in your base pay because of your performance from the previous year. And if there's really high performance, you'll get a higher merit increase, and if it's low performance, you'll get a lower merit increase. And what merit does is it increases your base pay. So your base pay continually goes up. The good thing with this is, of course, it starts to have that compounding effect. And you remember compounding interest versus simple interest. And compounded interest is actually really good. The more that you invest early on, the easier it is to increase your pay over time. It carries forward. And so the challenge with this is often if we have a really good performer their first few years and then they kind of fall down and they're not as good in their later years, we're still paying them a higher salary than we should simply because we're continually paying for past performance because it's compounded in to their base pay. But we do see overall that when employees get merit pay increases, it does do a good job of increasing the likelihood that they will perform and continue to perform well. Bonuses are similar to merit pay in that they are about rewarding past behaviors. The difference with merit pay and bonuses, as I've said, is that bonuses are a lump sum payment. It's a one-time, and it resets to zero for the next year. So you might get a 5% bonus on your base pay, and your base pay doesn't change in year two. Year two, you get another 5% bonus, but your base pay stays the same. Whereas with merit pay, if you get a 5% increase, it's the 5% increase that gets compounded and added to your base pay. So that you get 5% of your base pay, then you get 5% of what that was, and it adds up much faster. So from the perspective of the employee, we would prefer to have merit pay because it's a compounding effect and we get more and more money faster. Whereas bonuses zero out every year and then you add it up and you add it in. So the goal, of course, of the bonus is, again, to reward that past behavior, to recognize what someone has done. But the company doesn't have to keep paying for past behavior. It only pays for the behavior of that year that it wants to reward, and then it moves forward from there. Spot awards are simply an after-the-fact recognition for somebody who's done an exceptional performance, someone who went above and beyond, someone who did a great job with sales. So you not only will give them whatever pay they earn for that, but you would also do a recognition, employee of the month, a photo somewhere, an extra little vacation or weekend away or dinner out in recognition for outstanding performance. It's kind of like a bonus, but it's not always financial. Often it's non-financial, or it's not cash. It could be a cash equivalent of a dinner out or something along that line. Individual incentives work like this. It's like a commission, or it's a per unit piecework kind of plan. So like a commission is a situation where someone sells a house. They get a 6% commission on the sale price of the house. So it's known in advance. They know what they can expect, and they know what performance they need in order to achieve the reward that they want. So it keeps people focused, very focused on whatever the goal is that they need people to accomplish in order to get the reward, to get the incentive. Piecework is like people working in a manufacturing environment, and for every unit that they make, they get $1. And if they make 10 units, they get $10. And if they make 20 units, they get $20. Now, I don't know if that's a reasonable amount of money, but it just gives you an example of how that would work. So a piecemeal, piecework rather, is just paying people for every piece that they create, whatever that might be. And then standard hour plans is the employee is paid based on the completion of a task within a time period. So they have to do something, but it has to be done within a day or an hour. And if they do that, then they get that standard hour reward, that incentive, because they know in advance what to expect. And again, a little bit more detail on sales commissions. It's usually a percentage of revenue. It does result in aggressive selling behavior. So people don't take no for an answer because they know they need to do hard sales in order to be able to make their bonus. And if you've ever been trapped by a salesperson who would not take no for an answer, you understand what that means. Obviously, different salespeople have different tactics, and the worst ones will result in really aggressive selling behavior. But I will also tell you that often these kinds of incentives or commission systems can result in unethical behavior. For example, Wells Fargo, a number of years ago, had these new financial instruments that they wanted their people to sell, and the goals were fairly aggressive, and they were not really able to get the level of sales that people wanted. So people started opening up fake accounts, opening up fake credit cards, because they were afraid of losing their commission and their whatever their incentives systems are. And so they lied and cheated, and they engaged in unethical behaviors. So that kind of aggressive selling can result in unethical or illegal behaviors, which can get the company into trouble. So again, going back to the discussion about the role of incentives, they work for very specific kinds of systems, and they only work when it's kind of a rudimentary, non-difficult thing. The more you do of this, the more units you make, the more money you make. And so it encourages people to make the units, at a certain level of quality, and they can make more money that way. What we don't want is people to solve problems and try to solve creative problems or have difficult issues, and ultimately have an incentive in place, because the incentive actually decreases performance. It doesn't increase performance. And again, listening to the Daniel Pink TED Talk that is based on some of the stuff that you listened to in the engagement lecture. That's what that gets at. We can also have pay for performance at the group level. And this is about trying to reward group behaviors, not individual behaviors. Now, there's some challenges to this, right? Because the group works together, the group achieves the goals, and some people may or may not work harder than others. And in that situation, if they are working harder than others, they're not necessarily going to make more than the other people on the team. Everybody gets the same cut, right? So The good side of team rewards is that everybody is expected to participate and everybody gets a share of the bonus or the pay for performance, whatever it is. The downside is it can encourage social loafing and things like that because people can kind of hide away. And this is kind of like working on group projects for students, right? Sometimes you have a really great team that works really well together and everybody pulls their weight and they do really well in terms of their paper and their research and all the things they need to do. And then you've got some members who do the bare minimum, don't really contribute, don't respond to emails or phone calls, and then ultimately they get the same reward as everybody else. So it's important that we recognize and find ways to identify and eliminate social loafing. So we can have people do peer evaluations where they can evaluate each other on the team, and then the team can decide how to allocate the rewards in the end. Gain sharing is a way for the organization to set productivity goals. They're very clear, they're very concrete, and then what happens is, as employees, as the organization, as the employees, as the groups of individuals achieve those milestones, they get the gains in productivity. There is improved productivity, which means they make more money. So there's a difference between the current productivity level and the desired productivity level, and that difference can result in greater profitability for the company. Because the differences in productivity result in different outcomes. So higher productivity means higher outcome and less effort, and they can make more money doing that. And so gain sharing is set up in such a way that once the company sets the goals, everybody has transparent access to that, and then they all work together towards the goal. But like any kind of group process, there is problems with social loafing and the difficulties in implementation. But when it's calculated well and when it's managed well, it can be a really great reward to get people to behave in a more effective and efficient manner.